Kentucky's tourism board sells you rolling bluegrass hills and bourbon aging peacefully in red barns. The actual sky above this state seems to have skipped several chapters of the meteorology textbook. And by the end of this list, you'll trust your weather app about 40% less. Start with the basics. Kentucky summers are supposed to be hot. Fine. Except the humidity here doesn't just accompany the heat, it seems to physically bully it. 92 degrees in Louisville doesn't feel like 92 degrees. It feels like standing inside a mouth. The dew point climbs so high that meteorologists occasionally just throw up their hands and call it tropical. Despite the nearest ocean being roughly 500 miles away. Who signed off on landlocked humidity this aggressive? Number 2. Spring is supposed to ease you gently out of winter. In Kentucky, spring instead behaves like a light switch being flicked by a toddler. 68 and sunny on a Tuesday, 31 and sleeting by Thursday, and nobody in the state seems remotely surprised. Locals just shrug and say, "That's Kentucky," as though unpredictability were a charming personality trait rather than a logistical nightmare for anyone trying to plan a picnic. Number 3. The famous bourbon fog that rolls over distillery country isn't poetic ambience. It's Angel's share evaporation mixing with river humidity to create a genuinely strange microclimate around whiskey warehouses. Some mornings you can't see the barns for the mist. Would you ever trust a GPS route through a valley that regularly disappears behind alcohol-scented haze? Number 4. Kentucky sits in a spot where 4 separate storm tracks like to collide, which sounds impressive until you realize it means the state can experience snow, thunderstorms, and flash flood warnings inside the same 24-hour period. Meteorologists call this a convergence zone. Residents call it Tuesday. Number 5. Groundhog Day predictions get taken shockingly seriously here, with local festivals treating a rodent's shadow as a legitimate forecasting tool. Somehow this method has proven roughly as accurate as some professional models. That should worry you more than it amuses you. Number 6. Ice storms in Kentucky don't politely coat the roads and stop. They coat power lines until entire counties go dark for a week, then coat tree limbs until they snap like breadsticks, then coat your car door shut so thoroughly you need a butter knife and a prayer. The next entry gets worse. Number 7. Frost dates here are listed as guidelines, not promises, and gardeners statewide have learned to distrust them entirely. Plant too early based on the official last frost and you'll wake up to a late season freeze murdering your tomatoes in one overnight sneak attack. The calendar apparently means nothing to the sky. Number 8. Kentucky thunderstorms have a habit of forming with almost no warning on otherwise clear afternoons, a phenomenon locals nickname popcorn storms, because they pop up individually and randomly, like kernels detonating in a microwave. You could be grilling in full sun while your neighbor 3 streets over gets pelted with marble-sized hail. Number 9. The state's elevation changes constantly and dramatically over short distances, meaning it is entirely possible to drive from a snow-covered ridge into a rain-soaked valley in under 15 minutes. Would you trust a single weather app to keep up with that kind of terrain-driven mood swing? Number 10. Kentucky's tornado season doesn't restrict itself to spring like a normal, well-mannered tornado season should. Late fall and even early winter tornado outbreaks have become disturbingly common, catching residents off guard while they're decorating for the holidays instead of watching the sky. This next fail defies basic seasonal logic entirely. Number 11. The infamous December 2021 tornado outbreak tore a track over 200 miles long through the western part of the state, at night, in December, a month most Americans associate with snow globes rather than supercells. Meteorological science generally frowns on nighttime winter tornado marathons. Kentucky did not get the memo. Number 12. River Valley fog in places like Owensboro and Paducah gets so thick that morning commutes regularly slow to a crawl, with visibility dropping under 100 feet along the Ohio River. Locals treat this like a minor inconvenience rather than the near-zero visibility hazard it actually is. Number 13. Kentucky somehow manages to have both drought warnings and flash flood warnings issued for the same county within the same month, sometimes the same week. The soil goes from cracked and parched to completely saturated so fast that hydrologists have basically stopped trying to explain it in sound bites. Number 14. Snow squalls, the sudden whiteout bursts more associated with the Great Lakes, show up in Kentucky with startling regularity, especially along I-64 and I-75, turning a clear highway into a blind, skidding mess in under 60 seconds flat. brake lights vanishing into white before drivers even register what's happening. Emergency dispatchers describe them as instant, which is not a word you want attached to your interstate. Number 15. The Cumberland Gap region creates its own wind tunnel effect through the mountain pass, meaning gusts there can be dramatically stronger than anywhere else in the state at the exact same time. One valley over, the flag on the porch isn't even moving. Here, it's horizontal. Number 16. Kentucky's allergy season has been ranked among the worst in the entire country, thanks to a bizarre combination of humidity, pollen, friendly tree cover, and stagnant valley air that traps allergens instead of dispersing them. The wind, apparently, only shows up when it's inconvenient and disappears the moment it could actually help. Number 17. Hailstorms here have been recorded producing stones large enough to dent car hoods and shatter greenhouse glass, then vanishing completely within 10 minutes, leaving blue sky and confused residents standing in ice. The town planners somehow get even lazier when it comes to storm shelter access, which brings us to the next entry. Number 18. Despite sitting squarely in an active tornado corridor, huge stretches of rural Kentucky still lack public storm shelters or reliable basement access, because much of the housing stock was built on slabs or crawl spaces. Who approved building an entire tornado-prone region without proper underground refuge as standard practice? Number 19. The Ohio River itself acts as an unofficial weather boundary, meaning towns just across the water from each other in Kentucky and Indiana can experience wildly different storm severity on the same night. One side gets a light drizzle, the other gets a tornado warning. The river apparently plays favorites. Number 20. Kentucky's Indian summer, a stretch of unseasonably warm weather in autumn, arrives so reliably yet so unpredictably in timing that farmers have learned not to plan harvest schedules around it at all. It might show up in October. It might show up in November. Nobody, including the almanac, seems to actually know. Number 21. This next infrastructure fail defies basic physics. Several small Kentucky towns built directly in narrow river hollows flood almost every single spring, sometimes multiple times per season, and yet keep rebuilding in the exact same footprint. Insurance companies have started treating certain zip codes less like risks and more like recurring subscriptions. Number 22. Wind chill advisories and heat index warnings have technically been issued for the same Kentucky county within the same calendar week during the state's chaotic shoulder seasons, meaning residents packed away winter coats on Monday and were checking heat exhaustion symptoms by the weekend. Somewhere, a meteorologist just closed their laptop and walked away. Number 23. Local lore across rural Kentucky still leans heavily on woolly worm coloring and persimmon seed shapes to predict winter severity, and county fairs host actual events around these methods. Somehow these folk techniques get discussed on local news broadcasts with a straight face, right next to the actual radar. Number 24. Kentucky's karst topography, riddled with caves and sinkholes, means heavy rainfall doesn't just flood surface roads. It can collapse them entirely when underground water erodes the limestone beneath. A road can be perfectly fine at sunset and swallowed by morning. Could you imagine driving that route to work every day? Number 25. Derecho windstorms, essentially fast, moving lines of straight-line hurricane-force wind, have flattened stretches of Kentucky forest and farmland with almost no formal warning system tailored to them, since most residents associate danger with rotating tornadoes rather than straight blasting wind. And somehow we're still just scratching the surface. Number 26. The Bluegrass region's rolling hills create so many microclimates that two farms 3 miles apart can report completely different frost conditions on the same morning, ruining one farmer's crop while leaving the neighbors untouched. Local agricultural forecasts have essentially given up trying to generalize. Number 27. Kentucky lightning strike density is higher than most people expect for a landlocked state, driven by the same humid, unstable air that fuels its popcorn storms. Golf courses across the state have quietly become some of the most statistically dangerous places to be during a summer afternoon. Number 28. Certain eastern Kentucky mountain hollows receive almost no direct winter sunlight due to steep terrain, meaning ice patches on shaded roads can persist for weeks after a storm while nearby open roads are bone dry. Some of these patches have earned informal nicknames from residents who've learned exactly which curve to slow down for, year after year, storm after storm. Number 29. The state has recorded temperature swings of over 40 degrees within a single 24-hour period, more than once. officially confirmed by the National Weather Service, rather than just anecdotal grumbling, with mornings starting near freezing and afternoons closing in on 70. Layer up before breakfast, strip down by lunch, dig the coat back out before dinner. Kentucky doesn't have seasons so much as hourly moods. Number 30. Flash flood emergencies, the National Weather Service's most severe flood classification, have been declared multiple times in the last several years for eastern Kentucky, an area also prone to landslides thanks to steep terrain stripped of stabilizing tree cover by past mining. Water and unstable slopes make an aggressively bad combination. Number 31. Kentucky's official state weather quirks include measurable snow falling in April with alarming regularity, sometimes coating blooming dogwood trees in a genuinely surreal late-season dusting. Spring festivals have had to build snow contingency plans into their permits. Number 32. Have you ever seen a local weather habit this stubborn, despite repeated flash flooding? Several low-water bridges throughout rural Kentucky remain the only crossing option for entire communities, meaning residents routinely gamble on whether the crossing will still be passable by the time they need to come home. Number 33. The 1974 super outbreak tore through Kentucky with such ferocity that entire towns like Brandenburg were functionally rebuilt from the ground up afterward. And meteorologists still use that outbreak as a textbook benchmark for extreme tornado clustering. It remains one of the deadliest tornado days in American history, largely centered on a state most people don't associate with Tornado Alley at all. Number 34. Kentucky's humidity doesn't fully disappear in winter the way you'd expect from a colder season, which means winter precipitation frequently arrives as freezing rain and sleet rather than clean, simple snow. The result is a slick, layered ice mess that's harder to clear and far more dangerous to drive on than fresh powder. Number 35. This next entry breaks basic seasonal logic entirely. Some parts of the state have recorded thunder, snow, actual thunder and lightning, occurring during an active snowstorm, a phenomenon so statistically rare elsewhere that storm chasers specifically travel to the region, hoping to catch it on camera. Number 36. Kentucky's terrain is so fractured by hills and hollows that the National Weather Service has to issue different warnings for adjacent zones, barely a few miles apart. Because a storm cell can dump 6 inches of rain on one ridge and completely miss the valley next door. Standard County, wide alerts routinely undersell or oversell the actual danger depending on which side of the ridge you live on. Number 37. Multiple small Kentucky towns have been struck by tornadoes more than once within the same decade, occasionally along nearly identical damage paths. A statistical improbability that meteorologists still can't fully explain beyond acknowledging that certain terrain features may funnel storm cells along repeat corridors. Would you rebuild a house directly in a documented repeat strike zone? Number 38. Ice storms have occasionally left over 100,000 Kentucky households without power for more than a week at a time, with rural cooperatives struggling to reach downed lines buried under collapsed ice-laden tree canopies on narrow mountain roads that plows can barely access in good weather, let alone during a state of emergency. Number 39. Peak absurdity alert portions of the same Kentucky county have simultaneously sat under a winter weather advisory and a severe thunderstorm watch, issued on the same calendar day, because the cold front and warm sector were fighting for control of the exact same airspace above the state. The forecast graphic that day looked less like a weather map and more like a ransom note. Number 40. The Ohio River has flooded catastrophically enough in Kentucky's history, most notably in 1937, to submerge entire downtown business districts underwater deep enough to navigate by rowboat. And flood stage markers from that event are still visible painted on buildings today as a permanent, slightly ominous decorative choice. Number 41. Certain remote eastern Kentucky hollows are so narrow and steep, walled that emergency weather sirens installed on one ridge are functionally inaudible to homes located just a single hollow over, meaning some of the most flood and landslide-prone residences in the state have effectively no working early warning system at all. Number 42. Kentucky's climate has become erratic enough in recent years that the state has recorded both record-breaking winter cold snaps and record-breaking summer heat waves within the same 12-month span. A whiplash pattern that has left infrastructure built for moderate weather straining at both extremes simultaneously. Number 43. And somehow, after everything you've just heard, the single dumbest thing about Kentucky weather might be this: despite centuries of flash floods, thunder, snow, nighttime winter tornadoes, and roads that quietly collapse into caves, the overwhelming majority of Kentuckians will still, without irony, tell you the weather here isn't that bad. At some point, that's not optimism. That's a full-blown meteorological Stockholm syndrome. So maybe that's the real takeaway here. Somewhere between quirky small town charm and full-blown natural disaster sits a very thin, very blurry line. And Kentucky has spent centuries dancing right on top of it, without once falling off completely. It's not that the science is wrong. It's that Kentucky's atmosphere apparently never agreed to follow it in the first place, and honestly, at this point, meteorologists might just be along for the ride like the rest of us. So which one of these 43 genuinely stunned you the most? And does your home state have a weather glitch that could give Kentucky a run for its money? Drop it in the comments, I'm genuinely curious. And if you liked digging through this much beautifully chaotic meteorological nonsense with me, stick around. Because there are plenty more states with their own suspicious relationship with basic physics still waiting to be